Hello people, and welcome back to another GCSE English Lit revision video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the poem London by William Blake. As usual, we'll discuss context, form and structure, as well as language and themes. So let's start with context. Blake was a poet who was greatly influenced by the Romantic era. Romantic poets preferred to focus on intense emotion and feeling as opposed to fact or reason. As he lived in London, he saw the way the upper classes were exploiting the lower classes on a daily basis. This, coupled with his nature as that of a radical thinker, led him to despise the class divide which was so visible within London in 1792 when Blake wrote the poem. Blake had previously written a collection of poems entitled Songs of Innocence, which focused on the brighter sides of life, so to speak. These poems typically took a positive and perhaps naive view on the world. However, this poem was published in a later collection of poems called Songs of Experience, which took a far more negative and gloomy view of the world, often reflecting the corruption and inequality that was rife in society. Blake was one of a number of romantic poems who was inspired by the French Revolution. It is well known that Blake was not fond of powerful institutions such as the monarchy and the church, as he felt they were negligent in their duty to protect the poor and vulnerable within society. So let's talk form and structure. This poem is a dramatic monologue, meaning it's a first-person account in which the speaker passionately describes what they are seeing as they wander the streets of London. It's formed of 4 quatrains and has a relentless A-B-A-B controlled rhyme scheme with monosyllabic rhyming words, which could be linked to the controlled oppression within society. The regular rhythm of iambic tetrameter, in which each line is formed of 4 iambic feet, could reflect the sound of his feet as he wanders through London. However, Blake very deliberately disrupts this meter in specific lines of the poem to make them stand out, in order to highlight the way people accept their own oppression. In terms of the structure, Blake focuses on people and their struggles in the first 2 stanzas. Then the focus shifts to the institution he holds responsible in the 3rd stanza, with the focus returning to the people of London in the 4th stanza, further emphasizing how the working citizens are ignored and exploited by powerful institutions that should be protecting them. So, language. Blake uses lots of emotive and rhetorical language in this poem to persuade the reader of the injustice of the class system that was in place in 18th century Britain. He uses language to convey the relentless oppression afflicted on the lower classes through phrases such as mind-forged manacles, perhaps linking to the ideas of Karl Marx, who felt that people were prone to accept their own oppression. Emotive language is utilized specifically in the 3rd stanza, where Blake holds each powerful institution to account, firstly referring to the chimney sweeper's cry, which perhaps is a direct protest against child labour, as many chimney sweeps were usually young boys. He also creates the tainted imagery of the blackening church appalls, suggesting the corruption which is plaguing the church. The use of the word pall in appalls may be a reference to a pall being a funeral cloth, perhaps symbolizing how the church's moral integrity is somehow dying. It could also be suggested that he makes a reference to the French Revolution in the quote, "runs in blood down palace walls," in which the masses rose up and overthrew the French monarchy. Secondly, Blake uses language to convey the senses, which builds a vivid image in the reader's mind of what the speaker is experiencing. For example, the use of words to create a sense of the distressing nature of the city, such as cry, fear, and curse. In addition, the use of repetition acts as an unwelcome emphasis on the sheer number of people affected by these horrors. For example, the repetition of Marx in stanza 1 highlights how people are somehow permanently marked by their experience. Furthermore, the 3 repetitions of every in the 2nd stanza is a painful reminder how despair affects everyone and there is no relief. Perhaps this is an urgent plea by Blake himself, suggesting that society needs to significantly reform. Finally, the poet's use of contrasts in this poem has an effect emphasizing unfairness and how society doesn't seem to make sense. This is especially true of the final stanza. Firstly, with Blake using the powerful contrast between the immorality of prostitution and the purity of new life. Also, the final words of the poem provide us with the extremely powerful oxymoron of the marriage hearse, which links the jubilant connotations of marriage with the dark connotations associated with death. Through the use of such a powerful contrast, Blake is able to convey how society is convoluted and that everything has been destroyed by corruption and exploitation. And finally, let's move on to the themes. I've been able to draw 3 main themes from this poem, first of which being confinement. The images which Blake creates of the mind-forged manacles, for example, creates a sense of an unending cycle of misery, as it suggests people are trapped by the shackles of these manacles. Another major theme is corruption, especially amongst the upper classes, as well as powerful institutions. Stanza 3 acts as a complete indictment of palace religious as well as secular power, and even suggests that these powers are somehow joining forces to oppress the poor and vulnerable, the very people they should be protecting. This also ties in with my third theme, which is social inequality, and specifically the rich versus poor attitude widely presented throughout the poem. For example, the poem starts out describing the chartered streets, with the upper classes even having control over powerful natural features, such as the River Thames. This stanza then ends with Blake giving examples of individuals full of weakness and woe, further highlighting the rigid division between the classes. Throughout the course of this poem, Blake clearly denounces social, political, and economic inequality, and creates a voice for the downtrodden members of society. Anyway guys, that brings us to the end of this video. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'll hope to see you again soon.